I'd like to welcome all of you to our first session called Mapping the Terrain. Some of you have been communicated through emails about what this session is about. I'll be the first to say I am not sure what this session is about. I have a few ideas. Basically, it is to just talk among ourselves about this creature or these two creatures, the dramaturg and dramaturgy. I had in the early stage an idea of how we could gather these people from Asia and they will be talking about each country's practice. And then I realized maybe that might not be the best way to go. I'm so sorry if some of you have prepared that, and I'll say now that it is not going to waste for the simple reason we do want that kind of intelligence and information and data. So you can still pass it to me or some of us where we are collating. Many of the invited speakers have also been given quite a lengthy, detailed questionnaire. And these questionnaires had quite, in-depth look at dramaturgy and the dramaturg, and we collated them. Now, based on some of the responses that we got, we are now switching things up for this particular session. The first half an hour, Robin and I will try to lead, moderate, initiate a kind of an open discussion where we will go into literally what is this animal, dramaturg and dramaturgy, where we will be talking about certain kinds of responses that we got from your questionnaire. After half an hour, we're going to do breakout sessions or groups. I will give further instructions, but just to keep in mind that to keep it really just flowing in terms of discussion and exchange of ideas. Yeah? So, I think if there's nothing else, I'd like to really just go straight into the next session because we do have quite a bit of things to do. For the next half an hour, what we'd like to do is tackle some of the responses that we got from your questionnaire pertaining to the ideas of dramaturgy and dramaturg and the dramaturg in relation to maybe some of the definitions, understandings that are culturally or socioculturally specific to the region. I will probably now be talking a little bit, and then I probably would ask other people to talk also about their views in relation to their responses. So, as many as there are different definitions of dramaturgy and dramaturg, one of the things is that we cannot sort of avoid language. There's a lot of translation and transliteration in the work of dramaturgy and also about dramaturgy. The term itself has been used or repurposed or reconfigured to different sociocultural and sociolinguistic ways. So it was quite interesting for us to just read some of your responses about how you think of dramaturgy in terms of your specific cultural and sociocultural location. Would you like to take over at the moment, or do you? We're trying to keep this quite organic.
We'll just sit down and keep this quite informal. I was most struck by, I think, Yinan's response that in translation, in Mandarin, I'm effectively bilingual, so I speak, read, and write Chinese. There isn't a term that encompasses. I think one of the issues with Mandarin and in translation is that we can use the language automatically. That means we can do a homophone translation of it in a way that Japanese can, in terms of using the katakana to kind of like do a Japanese script version of the word dramaturg. Now, in Mandarin, there isn't. And at the level of translation, and there are a few that have been suggested, they always operate on the level of consultant, right? So there are either a 策划, 编创, or which are on a consultancy level that really doesn't, in my view, encompass what a dramaturg actually does. So I think terminology. I'm literally going to pass the mic over to Ngean to talk a little bit about this and how that can color perception. Because if it's a consultant, then, I mean, that's not a wrong definition of a dramaturg. But how do we, and I would like to hear from different cultures, do you have a terminology for it? Or do you merely adopt the English or the anglicized word for it? So, Ngean?
Thanks. I just talked with the colleagues from Hong Kong and got to know my translation of dramaturgy is being used in Hong Kong, and people do not know it's my translation. Actually, it's a direct translation of dramaturgy. Drama as 戏剧, it's a fixed translation for that. And 构作, 构 is kind of yeah, Turkey, if we go back to the original meaning, so it's kind of a construct or to do pieces. So that's where the translation, Chinese translation character come from. 构 is kind of structure and make structure of, and 做 is to do. So basically, I find this direct translation perhaps is the best way to translate it. And before that, as you mentioned, a consultant, 文学顾问, or literary manager, or literary consultant, it tries to conclude, to close the door to the dramaturgs, to close the door, and the consultant is not part of the creation team, and that's basically the major difference that I want to develop a new translation. It's not outside. It's both outside and inside, and this inside is being part of a team, have to be depicted in this translation, I guess.
How well has this, I've now found out that Hong Kong colleagues have adopted it. So the concept of a 构作, right, which I think it's new. It's a questionnaire that I've actually read it. How well has it gone down? Have other companies do they recognize? Is there a need to put a legend and explain it to practitioners in your area and in your country?
Yeah, actually, it's quite interesting because in China, almost all the people I met in our academy, I established the first BA program in dramaturgy in Beijing at the Central Academy. All of my colleagues are against this translation because it's hard to conclude students, and people do not know what 戏剧构作 is. It's quite strange. So they prefer to call my program as 戏剧策划. It's also consultant or to make it happen, this kind of thing. But in Shanghai, I heard, and in Guangzhou, and in other cities, and in Hong Kong, people use this term. And I think it's being used outside, but not in Beijing, not in my academy. So it's quite strange. But I heard some independent groups begin to use this term. And also in Hong Kong, I just heard from a colleague that it's become a quite general translation of dramaturgy. So it's also shocking for me. I did not know that.
I just want to ask, to probe a bit more when we were talking about specific terminology and how it's being used. So that's on a linguistic level, but in terms of the practice of it, especially where you come from, especially with Ngean, you from China, straddling China and Germany, how do these words then impact the way dramaturgs work? Maybe you can talk a little bit about that, especially your work, which is theater mostly, right? Performance.
Yeah, before I coined this term, and there were dramaturgs in China, but they are part of the system because China, the Chinese government used to use theater as a propaganda organ. So there were dramaturgs, the people who function as dramaturgs in the troops, in the major big theater troops, and they're taking of the leading role of the whole company. They are the company leaders, or they are the major writers, playwrights of the group, or they are directors. But
almost like an impresario, would you say? Like an impresario?
Yeah.
No.
No, it's quite like East Germany system, the DDR system. They just get this pedagogy goal or task from the state, and they should lead a whole group to study theories For example, the famous director Huang Zuolin, he's also a dramaturg, and he introduced the Brechtian theory to China and organized the whole group to study Brecht together.
Right.
So in some way, he functioned as a dramaturg, but it's the first generation of Chinese dramaturg, and they're very close linked with this kind of the system, like the East Germany. And after I coined this term, and the term is used by independent groups, and the independent groups are outside from this whole state system, and of course, their way of doing dramaturgical work is also changed.
Right. When you say the first generation, I'm just obsessed with kind of numbers we're talking about, the time period. This is, when was this, when you say first generation of dramaturgs?
I guess it's after 1949
Right.
until 1980s.
Thank you. Before we move on, do we have any responses or questions from the panel here first? Anything that you would like to add, observation?
Or any kind of similar conflicts in terms
Yeah.
of terminology where you come from? It'd be good to share like how well known the concept is, and would you coin a different term for it? Now would be actually a good time to kind of bring these issues up in terms of just really defining the field. No?
Which is not to be confused with maybe some of the other panels where we're looking at all these, what I term loosely as practical realities of dramaturging and dramaturgy. We're looking at specific socio-cultural and cultural contexts here. If there are no comments, actually, I would like to ask Ken to speak a little bit, following that on the way that dramaturgy is being used when you talked about the transliteration of the word itself, and how does that then work? Because you wrote something in the questionnaire that is very much aligned with the bracket quasi-sociological aspects of this, which is closely aligned with then, I guess, Goffman, right? Ken?
Okay. First of all, I have a kind of a disclaimer that the first question in this questionnaire was that whether you are trained properly trained as a dramaturg, and I shamelessly said no. And so my statement is actually from my very the personal perspective, and also as my background as probably the scholar trained in the in the discipline of sociology. So I responded to this particular question. First, I encountered the word dramaturgy in katakana transliteration of dramaturgy in Japan in 1990s when I studied at the university as an international relations student. And it didn't have any connection to the theatrical practices. It was just, it just meant the kind of a construction of the a kind of dramatic dynamics in particular phenomenon in the society, and it was really a kind of buzzword during that period. And everywhere I saw the dramaturgy in the sociological or I put the quasi-sociological papers. So and when I started to work as a dramaturg in English in Singapore, actually I came back to the question, whether this transliteration really worked to articulate something. And it was quite interesting to compare this with the Enan's the discussion just now, because if you translate into the Chinese characters has its own meanings, so that we Japanese have a kanji, the characters, so that I can really sense the meaning of that. So the character and the meaning is really correlated. Whereas this katakana transliteration doesn't say anything, doesn't mean anything by itself. So yeah, it's a sound. And so which means that this transliteration opens the, it's quite open for your interpretation. So you can interpret it anything. And if this is totally, if this concept is totally alien to you, you can create your own interpretation. So what I observed was that this word dramaturgy was quite conveniently interpreted in many different contexts. And at the end of the day, in that particular society, the meaning of this word dramaturgy was somehow different from dramaturgy in English. So by using this transliteration, we created some different version of the term dramaturgy, and so probably Japanese dramaturgy and the English dramaturgy should be somehow different. So, but the problem here is because of the proximity of the sound, it is even more confusing, because when you hear the word dramaturgy in Japanese, you almost automatically expect this means what dramaturgy means in English. But actually, it may not. And I believe it is not. So, so for me, my position is a bit ambiguous because I'm Japanese, but I live in Singapore. I'm practicing in Singapore. So I am trapped somewhere in between these two, English and Japanese. But for me, this transliteration of dramaturgy and probably the dramaturg itself in Japanese is somehow quite confusing because of this transliteration.
So following on that, Ken, if it's quite confusing, then how do you, I mean, as I've said before already, the work is always very different from when we get down to the brass and tacks of actually looking at the word. So in terms of practice, is there still a struggle with the word dramaturgy and dramaturgy for you?
Yes and no. Because at this moment I'm working, as a dramaturg, I'm working only in English, so that this doesn't make a big conflict at this moment. But a few days ago, I had quite interesting experience. Actually, I was working with Alvin Tan, sitting there, in one project, and we were talking about collaborations. And we found that in the discussion, so we discussed, why we collaborate, why we, why we need to do this in the collaboration. And we realized in discussion what Japanese group of people meant by collaboration in katakana transliteration was quite different from what we meant by collaboration in English. And their way of understanding collaboration was very specific, very narrow way of understanding. And probably this is because how the word was introduced to Japan in a very specific context. So so again, this transliteration, the confusion came in. And we had to spend quite a bit of time to fill in the gap, perception gap. So probably because of the proximity, we just take it granted too much that that we are meaning the same thing, but actually it was really not. So so it was a quite interesting, striking experience for me.
Thank you, Ken. Shintaro-san and Nanako-san, I'd like to hear about some of your responses to what has been said, your experiences especially. I know that the terminology rabbit hole is dangerous to go really deep down, but could you just share with us some of your experiences when you are dispensing the word dramaturgy and dramaturg, especially in your fields of work, compared to Ken, who has worked, for now anyway, predominantly in Singapore as dramaturg. There is Nanako, who has worked in Japan and Germany, right? In both areas, right? And then, of course, Shintaro, who teaches the concept of dramaturgy in his university. Could we hear from either of you or the two of you?
Yes, thank you. Yes, maybe maybe I have maybe less things about dramaturgy in Japanese, because probably when I get used to that term in Japanese, dramaturgy was when I was studying theater studies in Japan. And that was almost like 10, 15 years ago. And then at the time, there's no person who is doing dramaturgy in the theater project or in dance project in Japanese context. So I thought that no dramaturgy is always about the theories of no theater. So it's not about active, how do you say, like performative actions of dramaturgs embodied the dramaturgy, so those things. So then, and after I moved to the US, like I was in New York, and then I found out more about like dance dramaturgs working in independent dance theaters, independent dance project, and then I realized that this term, dramaturgy, is also about the action, or also about the dramaturg's role in the theater project. So it's more about lively term. But at the time, like I was not really speaking in Japanese. I was using the term dramaturgy in English. So it's kind of twisted in a way. And then now I'm back between Germany and Japan. And then dramaturgy is now kind of the fashion term in Japanese theater context. So, and then I'm also working as a dramaturg. So somehow like this kind of realities or kind of like a varieties of meanings comes back to the original term that I learned in more theater studies. So.
Shintaro-san?
I came across the word dramaturgy also in theater studies when I was a student, so it's more or less about 20-25 years ago. And then I still think that the word dramaturgy for many Japanese refers to how you compose a piece of theater in a written text. We use more often the word dramaturg. It is a very a fashionable word now. There are so many more dramaturgs now. But do we really talk about dramaturgy? For me, at least, we still think of dramaturgy as something related to a written text or sociological metaphors, like Takiguchi-san said. And yet, because Japanese are not very theoretical, and me neither, and we are not good at dealing with concepts, but I think we still need to explore more some strange relations between the word dramaturgy and dramaturg, because it is the relationship between the two words are so complex in a way, in reality.
Thank you. Yeah, it is. Just before one, I would like to just see if there are any other responses to this, especially to our other speakers who have experience working even in Japan and in Asia, such as David.
Hello. Yes, it works. It's a fascinating discussion. I'm thinking hard and fast about many of the things that have been said, and the space between dramaturgy and dramaturg is blurry. And I think it would be wise of us to look at that characteristic, that blurriness, as a positive, not as a negative, not as something that we should try and resolve or fix up, because actually I think in that way it's much more responsive to the artistic process, to the process of creation. One thing I'd like to pick up on is something that Ngean said, and forgive me if I misunderstood, but I wrote something down which reads back to me as the idea of dramaturgy as making a structure for doing. And it resonated with me, or perhaps it was wishful thinking on my part, but I've come to the idea of dramaturgy and the role of the dramaturg through my practice as an artist. So as an artist who has worked with dramaturgs, and then as an artist who has become a dramaturg on other people's projects. And I worked a lot in new technologies as the whole idea of dramaturgy was developing. So I started to think of dramaturgy in this way as making a structure for doing, but really in the way of, I call it an operating system. So I think of dramaturgy as the operating system of the production, in which the system of operation is a series of logics and decisions that have been developed in the alchemy of artistic research and practice. And the dramaturg, in relation to this operating system, contributes but does not make the dramaturgy. So the dramaturg is a contributor to the creation of the dramaturgy, but one of many contributors. And in this way, the dramaturg then is multifaceted. Their relationship to the artistic process as a matter of function is one which interfaces constantly in relation to the artistic process that the artists are generating on the floor. And so in my mind, there's two things that are going on. There's the dramaturgy, which is the operating system, and then there is the dramaturg who contributes to the creation of the operating system, but is not responsible for the dramaturgy.
Thanks, David. Peter, would you like to say anything? Are you... Mike.
Just to, I think, pick up a little bit on what David was saying, but also to respond a little bit to the other comments. I'm reminded of the fact that the term is inherently unstable. I mean, dramaturgy itself as a term is not an English word. It's not a word that is necessarily clearly defined within the English language or the German language or any other language that adopts the term. And as we know, it's a term that comes from a conjunction of two terms from classical Greek aesthetics. And according to classical scholars, the term itself is inherently unstable. People are not really sure what it means. And it brings together the concepts of drama and organisation of drama in its etymology. But beyond that, we have a series of, I think, debates around its application. And many people, I think, have chosen to, I guess, dwell in the inherent ambiguity of the term and to use that productively as a way of thinking about a creative practice. And it's inherently paradoxical because it enables us to think structurally and to think about the creative process in terms of a system or an operating system, but that process is no longer linear because we're using an ambiguous concept. So we can then, I think, dwell in the full complexity of a creative process. So.
I think what we're gathering here is definitely that the ambiguity is or would lead to actually productivity more than anything else, and creativity. I just now want to quickly move in a different direction where we were talking about terms of dramaturgy to the idea of, or the concept, so there was the thing, which is this concept of dramaturgy, to the person, the doer, the maker, or the interface. Yeah, Heli Minati, Indonesia, pointed out some interesting statements in her questionnaire where when we talked about the dramaturg, from what I gathered, she was talking about how there is still no term that really equates to the full, whatever that means, the full idea of the dramaturg. But there was some interesting local or colloquialism that has come up. The first time I heard it, I really, really liked the idea, was pendamping in Bahasa Indonesia. Pendamping, which one way to look at it was, to translate it, would be this person who literally is the companion or the person who sits side by side the performance maker. And then what was more interesting was lately Helly and I think her colleagues have come up with a new word, or rather there seems to become an evolution of that word from pendamping, which is side by side or companion or even partner. It has become, or it is rather that they want to encourage the use of the word pengganggu, which is, for those of us who speak Malay, that's even a more beautiful word, because the idea behind pengganggu, the root word being ganggu, is to disturb, to interrupt, to rupture even, to provoke, the provocateur. Maybe now I just want to quickly ask Helly to speak a little bit about this pengganggu and why it was used, because she did explain a bit of it. I'd like to hear from her, where it has very much to do with socio-cultural systems of hierarchy, right? Helly? Can someone pass Helly the mic, please?
So I'm talking from a fairly specific context, of course. So it's dance and what we did in Jakarta Arts Council. And it has, and I'm tracing back further to as early as 1979. Because, I mean, to put it very shortly, so Jakarta Arts Council is not like any other council probably in the world, because it's more like, it's run by artists, it's collective curatorial board consisting of artists and independent art workers, assigned, mandated to run a set of programs across 6 art forms within 3 years for the next 3. So every 3 years is changed, and one person only can hold 2 terms. So it's, and now the context is like dance, because dance in Indonesia, the context that I encountered in Indonesia is now has progressed, no, maybe regressed into, I digress. It's into the academization. So it's, and so it became a certain formality or formal ideas, you can't trace even in the works of choreographers, young choreographers. So we try to break it by this choreo lab. And the pendamping is, I refer back to maybe 1999. There are 2 of my colleagues there from theater. So it's 1999 when, there's a Kelola Foundation in Indonesia, and then it's a first foundation who offer open call, rational, it's very clear if you want to access funding for production. Because before that, you use your, informal, link and means to get access. And sometimes I wonder how, artists could produce performances, because it's, yeah. And then, so when young artists got a grant to produce a new work, the foundation will assign, first is the observer. So they will send someone who will write their observation about the process and the piece as part of a report, probably, like a third eye. And then, I don't know when, and they tried to, they went further by introducing this pendamping. So if you got, and then especially when they start this female choreographers project, like, selected. So and I knew that over the years they tried to introduce different models, because at first the artists resisted, like, why these people had to come, and a panel. So they modified over the years. So this is the practice before we did this choreo lab. And being dance before and after, there's a sense of hierarchy in terms of, education and transmission. So when we did this choreo lab, I invited two, informants, who I would say, not really trainer, but two artists, senior artists that I employed to accompany these three young choreographers, and they're not from dance. One from social, and one is from movement, elusive person as well. So, and then when we try to break this hierarchy, so we set up more like informal workshop for 4 days in one place, and this discussion can go until midnight, because that informality is important instead of classroom and blah, blah. And then it's always like this. These three young choreographers were overwhelmed and always said, we need your guidance there. And three of us just said, no, we don't want to guide you or whatever, but we just want to ganggu. I think it's provoke, but in a playful way. That's more, there's a playfulness in that. So it's, so we said, no, we really want to hear you. This is your process. We're just here to, provoke you, but in a playful way. So as part of your artistic process. So that's how, and I think it's very effective, because, in
Thanks.
in the 2 years that we did the program.
It's very interesting that I sense that you even found difficulty in trying to describe these three people and what they do, meaning that for me it sounds as if, especially coming from the Southeast Asian cultural landscape, the way when you say you bring in people to even observe young artists, there's already a sort of baggage, a sort of misconception of these seniors coming in, right? To want to look at the work, assess and judge. And so, I can imagine just talking to young artists saying that these are people with experience, but that it's not just about paying deference and surrendering total respect, right? Which goes then in the direction of this thing about mentoring. I had an interesting conversation yesterday with Yair also, where I myself, when dramaturging, I think few of us have this, we always draw lines, and because it is such a vague, amorphous term and concept and practice from one project to another, I sometimes draw lines or boundaries for myself, and then, so the question is always, when is the dramaturging really dramaturging, and when is it mentoring? When we suddenly find ourselves as a more experienced dramaturg paired with a younger performance maker, and the younger performance maker turns to the dramaturg and you feel it, especially in this region where the hierarchy is very strong, paternalism is very strong, where the younger artist turns and actually looks at the dramaturg and go, what should I do now?
Actually, I wanted to respond to Alice, because as a theater scholar, I know what dramaturgy is. It was part of what I studied. But what a dramaturg is, I never knew. Now, I actually was invited, me and Heng Leong, in 2007, and this was the first time we were told to assume this title of a dramaturg by the then festival director of the Singapore Arts Festival, Go Ching Li. So she says, would you like to be a dramaturg for this platform? She had another platform called Forward Moves to introduce and expose and give a platform for new choreographers. And Fu Quen, who was the person put in charge, was like the person in charge. So basically, she wanted Heng Leong and myself to replicate that and just use the word dramaturg. It was quite interesting because she never used the word dramaturg to describe Fu Quen. Yeah, she used the dramaturg to describe me because obviously her association of dramaturgy is with theatre. And then basically what we were told to do was we had to do a lot of things. We had to frame what that edition was. So from Forward Moves, it became Full Frontal, and we're supposed to give a platform to directors. So again, we were mentors, we had to commission, we had to frame, we had to curate, and we had to literally, so basically we had to babysit these directors with whatever projects that they want to do, and be there ready to listen to them, or as what Faith has described, if they have a meltdown, we're supposed to. And there were meltdowns. And they didn't know what to do, and the program got too big, we had to tell them, and so on and so forth. We were, at that time, the first edition, which involved Li Xie and Peter Sao, we acted more as advisors. Because we really didn't know what we just thought, because as practicing artists itself, we are very non-interventionists. We don't like people intervening, so we certainly were not going to intervene. And that got a bit out of hand. Then the second edition involved Zizi Azar, who did something very specific. She did Rhinoceros. So that was where, and also because Heng Leong had a lot of expertise on absurdism, so that was where it became a lot more dramaturgical, advising on what to do and so on and so forth. And by the time we came to the third edition, which involved Nelson Chia, that he wanted to do something devised, and then it went into something. So we too learned that way, and our involvement as dramaturg became a lot more participatory, from advisor into the actual involved in the making of it. I remember with Nelson's edition, I was also asked to provide text. And then there was a lot of dramaturgy involved because he wanted to do something that he would normally not do, and the platform allowed it. Heng Leong, would you like to add on to that?
I mean, I've been listening to this, and there are some things which I thought really interesting as a dramaturg, because I think you enter at different phase and with different kind of agreement on how it can be done. I think in some situation whereby you are involved right in the beginning, then I think the constructing of that structure becomes part of that process. But there's sometimes when you're working with a director or a playwright who actually knows the structure very well, then what you really do, I feel my process would really be like testing the structure, rupturing it, or even like, trying to extend that structure and see how it actually can involve other things in order to capture new possibilities. There were 3 occasions that I thought very interesting in doing all the dramaturgical work. The first time I did dramaturgy was really because it was Li Xie who was doing Vagina Lock. Initially, I was her director, but I felt slightly uncomfortable because she was doing her own story of what vagina would be like. So I decided then to move myself away from the name of the director, but to assist her in the process of actually how to structure the thing with her as the creator. So I'm always at the outside watching, but I'm also inside, which then the in and out becomes interesting because while you're in, but you're at the same time you're out. And you have to be in and out at the same time. Because there's the connection between the work and the audience, which is one aspect of a dramaturg when you are actually going through the work. So that was the first time that I sort of realized that I'm not the role of the director, but that was in about 2000 or 1999. The second dramaturgical experience was different, was because it was with a very, very experienced director, Danny Yong from Zuni in Hong Kong. Danny Yong knows clearly what he has in mind. I mean, he's an architect. So structure is something that he knows so well. So what was interesting was that most of the actors were from Singapore and some young people from Hong Kong. I think they didn't quite understand how he worked. And so I had to then to try to enter into the world of Danny Yong and how he constructs and try to translate that to the actors and to the young students. But at the same time, there was something that I realized, because it was a long process. There were 2 workshops leading to it. And so my service to him was then, in the end, as a dramaturg, was to dramaturg his structure, his way of working, and how his way of working can become a kind of structure where he, as a director, can sort of formalize. So that then became a different approach. The third experience was actually intercultural. Because I was working with a group who was trying to do a musical, 孟姜女, which is, but they're going to do it in English. So it was a playwright from Singapore, but she doesn't really read a lot of Mandarin, Jin Tae. Then the music director, the composer, the librettists were actually all from, I think, from UK. So they were doing something that comes from China, and so there were actually a lot of things that we were working in terms of just the script itself. So there were ideas that sort of didn't fit into the play. And so I then became like a translator, but as well as an informant. So I'm providing information and actually doing cross-cultural and intercultural kind of work, trying to make them understand, that setup may work in that particular setup, but it may not work as a story where you want to put it into those characters. So there was actually cultural nuances that you actually have to negotiate and try to work around. And so the whole process really became a huge intercultural discussion, both from many aspects, from the way the music is being used as a kind of musical, the lyrics, the metaphors, even the dramatic actions that happens on stage. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Ngean. If there are any pressing last-minute comments, we're actually going to wrap up this particular section and go into the next one, which allows time to continue this discussion. Yeah. So the next session is a bit more dynamic. If you probably would have noticed that there were handouts given to you. We're going back to good old school tutorials. What I've suggested here is that we do breakout groups of discussions. Yeah. And what's going to happen is that in these breakout groups, I think we have allotted about 35 to 40 minutes of discussion. There are also names of the people who are to be in the groups. For specific reasons, we would like to mix it up again. Some of you are in panels with other people, and sometimes you do not see or engage with some of the other fellow panelists from other sessions. So what's going to happen now is that it's going to be messy, chaotic, which we all love as dramaturgs to a certain extent, and then we find the order and structure again. In this breakout group, what I'd like to do is also to invite the speakers and participants of other sessions to join, meaning I can see now Elvin, Charlene, people who were not supposed to be on this one, to just forget it and come into it. So there are 3 groups that we've sort of suggested. If you look at your handout, the first group, I just called it roughly under the umbrella of praxis. And then in group 2, there's the general subject of conventions and change. And in the third group, there is pedagogy and transmission. How this is going to work is that I have sort of picked out some statements again, provocations if you like, from the questionnaires, and then there are discussion points that you could take up among your group, you decide. I think most of the groups have up to 2 statements of provocation. You do not have to talk about both or discuss both. You can even say, we don't want to do this, we want to actually continue with what we are talking now, as in the ideas and definitions of dramaturgy and the dramaturg, but I'm hoping that we can open it up further to different areas, which is why these specific subjects were chosen with their provocation statements, yeah? What's going to happen is the group will discuss for about 35 minutes. In that 35 minutes, I leave it up to you guys to take your coffee, tea, loo break. So it's free and easy. But in that discussion, what I'd like you to keep in mind is to nominate one person, a representative of sort, who would then give us a summary of your discussion and your kinds of threads of ideas that have come out of this discussion. The presentation or the speaking or the summarizing of this discussion is about 15 minutes. And then we have just a very short 10 minutes for maybe extra comments and Q&A from other groups. So 3 groups, 35 to 40 minutes discussion, including your break time. And then each group will present for about 15 minutes, followed by Q&A, and then group 2, group 3. So very quickly, I just want to run through, and if I've left out anybody's name, apologies, just come forward, yeah? It's going to be messy. So for the observers, I know that the previous format was set up where we could listen. I would say to them, just drag your chair and join whichever group you want to, lah. And then we'll take it from there. For the discussions, first one, group 1, I have assigned, which is praxis, I have assigned Peter Eckersall, Robin Loon, Yinan, Yair, Rohani, and Ken. So get yourself together. For the second group, conventions and change, there's Hao Ngean, Shankar, David, Charlene. Sorry, yes, come and join us all. And then Alison and Alvin. For the third group, which is pedagogy and transmission, there's Shintaro-san, Giselle, Nanako, Helly, and Heng Luan. Bilkis, because what you're doing is up to you whether you want to float freely or whatever, yeah? So, can we get moving and get some blood flowing? So I'll keep time, yeah? Thanks.